I never imagined my own son would look at me with such coldness. My name is Jenny, and I've spent most of my life being the quiet one in the background. The kind of mother who worked late shifts, skipped new shoes, and bit her tongue, more times than she could count, all for the sake of family. But that morning, sitting in a law office, I never wanted to be, and something inside me cracked. My son, the boy I once rocked to sleep with lullabies, sat across from me with his wife. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask if I was okay. His wife went first. Her voice was sharp, polished with cruelty. She leaned back in her chair like she owned the room and said I was just a leech sucking dry what her father-in-law left behind. I didn't flinch, though my hands tightened in my lap. I could feel the judgment in the room, thick as the silence that followed her words. She said they deserved the 43 million more than I ever would. I watched my son nod along his face, locked in something between shame and disdain. When he finally spoke, he didn't stutter or hesitate. He told me I was an embarrassment, that I should leave, that I'd already taken too much. I remember the way the lawyer shifted in his seat, awkward, maybe even uncomfortable. But he didn't say a word to stop them. I guess no one wants to get in the middle of a family tearing itself apart. I sat still, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. The way they looked at me, it was like I'd turned invisible, like nothing I'd done in my life ever mattered. My daughter-in-law crossed her arms with that smug little smirk. She said everyone in the family knew the truth, that I was just hanging on, waiting to snatch what wasn't mine. No one interrupted her. No one defended me. I looked around the table. Uncles, cousins, people I'd cooked meals for and helped raise. They wouldn't meet my eyes. Some looked down, some looked away. But no one spoke. It wasn't the words that hurt most. It was the silence. The silence of people who used to call me Aunt Jenny, who once hugged me at weddings and funerals. Now they couldn't even look at me. I sat in that chair, my back straight, even as I felt like I was sinking into the floor. My voice stayed quiet, but inside me, something was screaming. It's a strange thing, feeling grief while you're still alive. Grieving the child you raised, the family you thought you had, the love you believed would always come back around. That morning I realized they didn't just want the money. They wanted me gone, forgotten, erased from the story. But what they didn't know, what none of them could have imagined, was that I had written a story of my own, one they hadn't read yet. And it wasn't over, not even close. There was a time when my world revolved around a tiny boy with messy hair and scraped knees. I was barely 30 when his father passed, leaving me with bills I didn't know how to pay, and a child who needed more love than I had strength some nights to give. But I gave it anyway. I worked nights cleaning offices, mornings waiting tables, and afternoons fixing whatever broke around the house. There were weeks I survived on crackers just to make sure he had lunch money. I taught myself how to repair a leaky sink and mend torn clothes because I couldn't afford a plumber or a new jacket. Birthdays were homemade cakes and hand-sewn costumes. I remember him once asking why his toy didn't come in a box like the others at school. I told him some gifts don't need boxes to be special. He believed me then. Every decision I made was with him in mind. When I was offered a promotion that required long hours, I turned it down so I could pick him up after school. I wanted him to know someone was always there, someone who saw him. But love, it turns out, doesn't always echo back the way you hope. As he grew older, I noticed how he started pulling away. It wasn't sudden, just small things. Fewer phone calls, shorter visits. Then came the wedding. That day, I felt like a guest, not a mother. She never liked me. I knew it from the first dinner. Her eyes scanned me like I was a problem to solve. She called me old-fashioned, said I meddled too much, but all I ever did was ask if they were okay, if he was eating, if she needed help. The fights came fast after that. They said I criticized too much, hovered too close. I tried to explain. I wasn't judging. I was just trying to stay close to the boy I'd raised, but no matter what I said, I always seemed to say it wrong. Eventually, I was invited less and avoided more. Holidays were suddenly out of town. Messages went unanswered. When I did come by, I could feel the tension, like I was a reminder of something they didn't want to deal with. An old page in a story they had moved on from. I kept hoping it would get better, that one day he'd look at me like he used to, eyes full of trust. But that look never came back. What did come were polite nods, empty thank yous, and a quiet distance that hurt more than any words. Still, I never stopped loving him. I kept a drawer filled with his childhood drawings and letters. I even kept the macaroni necklace he made me in second grade. Every time I saw it, I remembered the boy who once told me I was his hero. That boy is gone now, replaced by a man I barely recognize, but somewhere in me I still carry the weight of every scraped knee I kissed, every fever I stayed up all night to monitor, every silent prayer I whispered over a sleeping child who had no idea how much he was loved. They may have forgotten, but I remember everything. The room fell quiet as the lawyer unfolded the document and adjusted his glasses. His voice was flat, almost rehearsed, as he began to read my late husband's will. According to the estate plan, my son and daughter-in-law would each receive 40%, and I would be left with 20%. There was a beat of silence before it happened. A low chuckle from across the table. My daughter-in-law glanced sideways at my son and couldn't hide her grin. She leaned back, arms folded, as if the war had already been won. I watched her savor every word, her confidence swelling like a tide. My son gave a small nod, then looked at me like I was just another piece of furniture to be moved out. He told me I could start packing, that the house wasn't mine anymore. The lawyer said nothing. He just kept his head down quietly, gathering papers, like this was just another Tuesday. But my heart, though aching, stayed still. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I heard them talk as if I weren't in the room. My daughter-in-law said 20% was more than generous considering all I'd put them through. My son agreed, said I should be grateful. I wondered if he remembered the nights I slept on a fold-out bed so he could have his own room. Instead of responding, I looked at the table, tracing the edge with my fingers to calm the shake in my hands. They thought I was broken, that I'd accept this quietly, that I'd fade into the background like they'd always hoped I would. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. Not yet. I took a deep breath and met their eyes one at a time. Then I smiled. Just a little. The kind of smile that holds a secret. They didn't notice. They were too busy celebrating their victory. But the lawyer caught it. His eyes flicked up to mine for a second like he knew. He knew this wasn't the end. Because while they thought I was defeated, I was only waiting. Waiting for the part of the story they didn't see coming. Just as my son leaned back already, basking in the glow of his imagined triumph, the lawyer cleared his throat again. He reached under the table and pulled out a second envelope, smaller than the first, but sealed with a bold red stamp. The room stilled curiosity creeping in as he held it up for all to see. This, he said, was a supplemental document that had remained confidential until now. His fingers moved slowly, deliberately, as he broke the seal and unfolded the contents. The rustle of paper sounded louder than it should have in that quiet, tension-choked space. He began reading aloud, but this time his tone shifted. It was heavier, more formal. The papers detailed a separate asset portfolio that had been created years earlier under a trust in my name alone, a trust that included a string of boutique hotels and investment properties across 5 states. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I simply watched the faces change around me. My daughter-in-law's mouth parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes flicked to my son, searching for something, maybe an explanation, maybe reassurance. But he had nothing. His smile was gone, his jaw set tight with confusion. The lawyer continued. The value of the portfolio was estimated at $43 million. All legally secured, quietly accumulated and shielded from the main estate. Every property, every deal, every document carried only my name. There it was. The silence I had waited for. Not the kind laced with judgment, but the kind that follows revelation. The kind that shifts power without anyone having to raise their voice. I sat there still and composed, as if this were just another meeting. But inside I felt a long-held weight rise off my chest. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to speak. The truth had done all the talking for me. My son looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. My daughter-in-law shrank back in her chair. Their confidence had vanished. What was left in its place was disbelief. And maybe, for the first time in years, a sliver of fear. It wasn't revenge I wanted, it was recognition. Not from them, from myself. That every sacrifice, every quiet choice had built something no one could steal or ignore. And now they had to sit with that. I had been the forgotten one. But at that moment, I was the only name that mattered. The room was still spinning from the hotel revelation when the lawyer lifted another envelope from his briefcase. This one was smaller and lighter, but he handled it like it was something fragile. He paused, then explained it contained documents related to a private patent. A hush fell again. The lawyer opened the envelope, pulled out a handful of legal papers, and began to read. It was a product. A device designed to solve a very specific household problem, one I had helped create, test, and refine over the course of a decade. He said the patent had been filed in both my name and my late husband's years ago, long before our son married, long before anyone paid us much attention. We had worked on it quietly in the evenings long after dinner, and dishes were done using whatever scraps of time we could find. I was a self-taught engineer. I didn't have a fancy degree or a lab, just notebooks filled with sketches, a garage full of parts, and the stubborn belief that I could build something useful. My husband believed in me. We believed in each other. And slowly, piece by piece, we did it. A major company bought the rights to the design 10 years ago. The amount we received was significant, and it was placed directly into a confidential account in my name. No one else knew, not even our son. We wanted to protect it from exactly what we were seeing now. My daughter-in-law looked stunned. Her expression froze as the lawyer listed the numbers. My son leaned forward, mouth slightly open, as if hearing my name in connection with something so valuable didn't quite compute. They didn't know I had that kind of mind, that kind of drive. All those years they dismissed me as a woman who had nothing left to offer. All those dinners where I sat quietly ignored, they talked over me about investments and business as if I had no place in the conversation. I had been building something they never bothered to ask about, but that didn't matter now. What mattered was that I had created something with my own hands, something that changed lives and changed mine too. It wasn't just about money. It was about the work, the patience, and the belief that even in silence, greatness can grow. I looked across the table at them, still silent, still unsure of how to react. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not because they finally noticed, but because I had nothing left to prove. My life, my mind, had already spoken. Just when the air in the room started to settle, the lawyer spoke again. He said there was one final clause in the will that hadn't been read yet. Something my husband had insisted be kept private until the right moment. Every head turned. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, then read the words slowly, carefully. Anyone who insulted, humiliated, or demeaned me during the proceedings would forfeit their right to inherit any part of the estate. There was a pause so thick you could feel it press against your skin. My daughter-in-law opened her mouth ready to object, but no sound came. My son leaned back, his jaw, tight eyes darting to the floor. The lawyer looked directly at them. He listed the statements they had made earlier, word for word. He had it all documented as required. The room went dead quiet. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The clause had done what years of pleading and silence never could. It exposed them without me ever raising my voice. They were stunned, frozen in disbelief. What they thought was a win had turned into a trap of their own making. The lawyer closed the file and made it official. They were disqualified. Not from the hotels, not from the invention, from everything. My 20%, their 40%, the whole estate, gone. I looked across the table, steady and silent. My hands folded. My voice is calm. For the first time, they saw the woman they tried to erase standing tall without a word. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. And justice had just spoken. In the weeks that followed, I didn't rush to spend or celebrate. I sat quietly, letting the dust settle, letting the truth take root in the silence left behind. And when it did, I knew exactly what I needed to do. A large portion of the money went into something I had dreamed of for years but never spoken aloud. A foundation for elderly women like me. Women who had given their lives to families who had been forgotten, dismissed, or pushed aside. I named it after my mother. A woman who taught me that strength doesn't have to be loud to change the world. Through the foundation, we offered housing, meals, companionship, and medical care. But more than that, we offered dignity. I also made sure to honor the one person who stood by me through it all, my housekeeper, Maria. She wasn't just someone who worked for me. She was my friend, my witness, my quiet anchor when the world turned cruel. Maria now manages the first center we opened. Her joy, her grace, and her humility have become the heart of what we do. I trust her with it more than I trust myself. Soon after, I began speaking publicly. At first, it was terrifying. My hands shook before every talk. But I reminded myself why I was doing it. I wasn't telling my story to relive the pain. I was telling it to light a path for others still stuck in the dark. I stood in churches, libraries, conference halls, speaking to rooms filled with women who saw themselves in my words. They cried. They nodded. They held my hand afterward and whispered, "Thank you, if it were sacred." For the first time in my life, I felt truly useful. Not just needed, but valued. Not as someone's mother or wife, but as a voice, a light, a survivor turned guide. I no longer walk with bitterness in my chest. I walk with peace, with pride. And every step forward feels like a promise to the woman I used to be, that I would never forget her. Because real healing begins when you stop trying to prove you were right, and instead start building something no one can take away from you. If you've made it this far, maybe you felt invisible too. Maybe someone made you believe your time had passed, that your worth had an expiration date. I want you to know they were wrong. You are not too old. You are not too late. And you are definitely not done. Life has a funny way of revealing your strength just when you think you've lost it. It shows up quietly, in the way you get out of bed after heartbreak, in the way you keep loving, keep giving, even when no one says thank you. I lived a long time in silence. I let people speak for me, speak over me, even erase me. But not anymore. And if I can find my voice again, so can you. You don't need a stage or a microphone to matter. You matter because you've lived, because you've endured, because even after everything, you're still here. So hold your head high even when no one's watching, especially then. Because that quiet pride, that steady grace, is more powerful than anyone realizes. And if this story has touched something in you, I hope you'll carry it forward. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Or better yet, share your own. Because your story has weight, it has truth, and it deserves to be heard.